these opening words by Layla Ibrahim. It's a blessing you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone. We have another story this morning. I'm kind of on a story kick. So we're going to stay where you are instead of coming forward and opening the Wonderbox. I'm wondering if some of you have heard this story before, the 3 questions. Yes. And it's by John Muth, which is adapted by Leo Tolstoy. And this is a nice telling of one of my favorite stories. I hope you like it. There once was a boy named Nikolai. That is a coincidence, for the record. That is a coincidence. Who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't always know the best way to do that. Nikolai's friends understood and wanted to help him. If only I could find the answers to my 3 questions, Nikolai continued, then I would always know what to do. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Nikolai's friends considered the first question. Then Sonia the heron spoke. To know the best time to do things, one must plan in advance, she said. Gogol, the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves to find something good to eat, said, you will know when to do the good things if you watch and pay close attention. Then Pushkin, the dog, who was just dozing off, rolled over and said, you can't pay attention unless you can't pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall on your head. Nikolai thought for a moment. Then he asked the second question, who is the most important one? Those who are closest to heaven, said Sonia, circling up into the sky. Oh, those who know how to heal the sick, said Gogol, scratching his bruised head. Those who make the rules, growled Pushkin. Nikolai thought some more. Then he asked his third question. What is the right thing to do? Flying, said Sonia. Having fun all the time, said Gogol. Fighting, barked Pushkin right away. The boy then thought for a long time. He loved his friends. He knew they were all trying their best to help answer his questions, but their answers didn't seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought. I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived a very long time. Surely he will know the answers I'm looking for. Nikolai hiked up into the mountains where the old turtle lived all alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging a garden. The turtle was old and digging was hard for him. I have 3 questions and I came to ask for your help, Nikolai said. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. Well, you must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you. The turtle gave him his shovel and thanked him, and because it was easier for a young boy to dig than it was for an old turtle, Nikolai kept on digging until the rows were finished. But just as he finished, The wind blew wildly and rain burst from darkened clouds. As they moved toward the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by a fallen tree. Carefully, Nikolai carried her into Leo's house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. The storm raged on, banging at the windows and doors. The panda woke up. "Where am I?" she said. "And where is my child?" The boy ran out of the cottage and back down the path frantically. The roar of the storm was deafening, pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain. He ran farther into the forest, and there he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry. Then he laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what the boy had done. The next morning, the sun was warm, birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing nicely, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby from the storm. At that moment, Sonia, Gogol, and Pushkin arrived to make sure everyone was all right. Nikolai felt great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends, and he had saved the panda and her child, but he also felt disappointed. He still hadn't not found the answers to his 3 questions, so he asked Leo one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. "But your questions have been answered," he said. "They have?" asked the boy. "Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig the garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging the garden. The most important one at that moment was me, and the most important thing to do was to help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg and saving her child. The most important ones were the panda and her baby. And the most important thing to do was to take care of them and make them safe. Remember, there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you are with. And the most important thing to do, the important thing is to do good for the one who is standing beside you. For these, my dear boy, are the answers to what is most important in this world. This is why we are here."
It matters what we do. According to Google, we make up to 35,000 decisions a day. And it matters what we do. Now, some decisions are big ones. Some decisions are little ones. But much of the time, it matters what we do. So how do we make all those decisions? Well, one approach is to list all the pros and all the cons. And that might help when the better choice is obvious, but it might also lead to agonizing. There is such a thing as paralysis by analysis. We think and we think and we overthink and we are stuck. When there is a binary choice, I taught my children a very simple technique, which I am happy to share with you this morning. And my son told me one time that he actually used it. They listen to what we say. You simply flip a coin. Now, it doesn't matter which side of the coin comes up. When you do the flip and you look at the coin, you are paying attention to your own reaction. How do you feel? If you feel relieved when you see heads come up, then you know that the heads option is the one you really should choose. But if you feel disappointed, then you know that the tails option is your choice. He actually did it. Now, in preparing for this service, Nic asked me where my ethics come from. I never considered that. I replied, well, they come from me. My ethics are internal. They are who I am. And that's why the coin flip works for me, because I already had that part in me. So the next question is, well, how did I get my ethics? I know that my family expected the truth and good behavior, doing what was right. So that's a part. What about our religion? I remember one Sunday morning, one of our members sat back there in the back row and said, I don't need heaven and hell to be a good person. Well, I feel the same way. A better answer for me is to look at role models. Well, what would Jesus do? There's a role model. What would Mr. Rogers do? That works for me. And I think our culture, definitely our life experience and our values help to form our ethics. If I think of my own culture and my own life experience, then I am working from my own point of view. So I am working from my own understanding of what goodness and right is. I've read that many religions have a teaching similar to what is called the Golden Rule. I should treat others as I want to be treated. This is also from my own point of view. Doctors Tony Alessandra and Michael J. O'Connor wrote a book for the business world proposing the Platinum Rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. This requires that we expand our knowledge and our consideration, that we make more of an effort to understand our others. Now, I've told you before, I did a brief study of paganism, for which I am very grateful. One of the teachings that I have taken from that is the Wiccan Rede. It states, and ye harm none, do what ye will. And this means basically, as long as it isn't hurting anybody, you can do what you want. This admits free will, but it also requires evaluation and responsibility. Is someone going to be hurt if I act in this manner? Often, don't we reflect after action? Oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that. And boy, I've been there a lot. The cycle of improvement is often act, reflect, and adjust. A lot of times we make errors as we try to be allies to those in the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities. And when we do, we have to take responsibility for what we've done and apologize. Dr. Maya Angelou tells us to do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. During the service at the beginning of the year, you probably remember, Nic asked us to consider what we wanted to banish. Well, this year I'm trying to banish my immediate, usually judgmental reaction and respond with a more thoughtful, reflective, and kinder reaction. I'm trying to reflect before I speak or act. It is hard. And I'm working on it, but I have a ways to go. Just ask Mark, he'll tell you. I am trying because it matters what I do. And it matters what you do. Our first reading this morning is from the centering hymn that we will soon be singing. So you all get to read it in song in a few minutes. The hymn is titled, Our Faith is But a Single Gem. It's one of my favorites. It was written by English Unitarian hymn writer John Andrews Story. Our faith is but a single gem upon a rosary of beads. The thread of truth which runs through them supports our varied human needs. Confucian wisdom, Christian care, the Buddhist way of self-control, the Muslims' daily call to prayer are proven pathways to the goal. From many lips, in every age, the truth eternal is proclaimed by Western saint and Eastern sage and all the good, however named. Beside the noblest of our race, our lives as yet cannot compare. May we at length their truth embrace and in their sacred mission share.
Our second reading is from an essay titled Our Responsibility in Society by Unitarian Universalist James Luther Adams, written in 1953. Love made concrete in the new community. These words about love, the power of God, freedom, and fellowship are sufficiently familiar among us. But again and again, we must ask, what do they mean? We must ask because one of the principal obstructions to the working of the power of God, one of the principal obstructions to response and responsibility, is an enervating devotion to mere abstractions. The adequate answer to the question must be a concrete answer. Responsibility is an incarnational response to the divine power of love, a response not only in personal, but also in institutional behavior. This demand of agape for institutional expression is to be observed already in the early Christian community. Indeed, we see what the early Christians really meant by love, not only through observing their personal attitudes, but also by looking at the kind of community which they believed to be demanded by love and the corresponding forms of responsibility involved. For the most part, the members of the primitive church were people who had previously been denied the dignity of responsibility in the shape of policies of church and state. Membership in the Christian church released them from this low estate. To be sure, it would be false to assume that the early church aimed directly to bring about a revolution against this situation in politics. Theirs was not in the usual sense a social revolution. Yet they did instigate a revolution. The response of these people to the power of God produced not only a new depth of intimacy in personal relations, it issued also in a new organization, in a church in which social responsibility and skill in administration were required. The lyrics of the song we just sang resonate through the ages and meet us at this critical juncture, of our shared ministry at UUCCI. We've acknowledged for decades, we have UUCCI now, that the importance of learning from and with people from different religious traditions is essential to being a Unitarian Universalist. Today, we meet on the Columbus Interfaith Campus, a campus that holds 5 faith communities. In this sanctuary, we gather this morning among diverse religious people who all seek in your own way to live ethical and meaningful lives of integrity. If you notice within our vision statement as a congregation, we have committed ourselves to pluralism, to our work of deepening and growing as an interfaith community. This commitment to pluralism goes hand in hand with our ethical commitment to foster a better world through courageous action. For those unfamiliar, our vision is to be a beacon for diverse religious thought and courageous action. Said differently, we cannot build interfaith community where diverse religious thought can flourish without courageous action. And vice versa, we cannot do courageous action or call it courageous if we are not aware of and engaged with our interfaith partners. For this is clear as day, at least to me. We live in a world that's predicated on diversity, whether biodiversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity, and the list goes on. Indeed, the natural way, nature's way, is the existence of innumerable, complex, interdependent living systems that maintain and help life thrive on Earth. Yet our courageous action is needed because we, as a dominant society, have drifted away from the original worldview to one that is obsessed with domination, materialism, and individualism. We act courageously in the world, not to build a new one, but to return to an ancient one, where indigenous wisdom and care for one another and all is centered once more. As Unitarian Universalists, our ethical journey has emerged from our liberal religious belief in human freedom, in reason, and in conscience. James Luther Adams shaped much of 20th century Unitarian Universalist thought around social ethics and notes an explicit shift that happened in our living tradition. What he frames as love made concrete in the new community, this metamorphosis unfolded when we looked beyond ourselves to beyond freedom, beyond reason and conscience, to include responsibility as an existential function of the religious community. Our conscience surely would lead us toward ethical decision-making alone, but in community, it opens the door for us to consider our collective responsibility to one another and to the web of all existence of which we are a part. In James Luther Adams' words, he defines responsibility as, quote, an incarnational response to the divine power of love, a response not only in personal, but also in institutional behavior. An incarnational response to the divine power of love. That might not be the words you would use today to describe why you aim to live responsibly. But this framing's essence, at least, is something as Unitarian Universalists we have incorporated into the very fabric of our lives. James Luther Adams' premise regarding love and responsibility foreshadows 70 years later what our wider UU Association of Congregation is considering adopting this June at General Assembly. Listen to these words that are a part of the revisions being proposed to Article 2. It's a long story. We can talk about it offline. Quote, love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. End quote. The heart of our ethical lives is the spiritual discipline of love. Personally, I've come a long way with my relationship with love. When I was younger, love was an expression of intense emotion. As an artist, it was at the heart of the creative process. Love was what connected artist to artist, the ensemble to the play, and all of these elements with the audience who were perhaps not the audience at all. As I got older, love took a more cosmic nature, a creative force still, yes, but one that is present where any two are gathered. Love can animate and shape those lives when we center it, which is what we are doing here at UUCCI. By celebrating love, as Chris said, as our mission calls us to do, we are bringing it forward as the ground of all our shared ministry here and beyond these walls. We might ask, as Chris did, how did we come to have the ethics we do? Did someone teach us ways to live ethically, morally, responsibly? Did we read a book or take a class that instilled in us the life skills for living and loving? My sense is that each of us will have different stories about what is at the center of our ethical worldviews. Perhaps love is it for you, but perhaps something else is at the center, or you have multiple centers, very postmodern. Perhaps you can trace it to a particular influential member of your family, a grandparent perhaps, or a religious or spiritual teacher, or a sacred text, ancient or modern, written or expressed in another medium. For many of us, ethical matters are shaped by experiences and refined over time with a focus on greater alignment, adjustment to live with integrity, that which we feel inside with what we do outside. For many, I'd expect that there is not just one tradition that holds all of the ethical teachings that you or I or we value. Does that make sense? For example, as Unitarian Universalists, there is not like a handbook of UU teachings, at least I haven't found one, on how to be a good person. Rather, it is likely a compendium of resources drawn from many traditions and people and experiences from our lives. I want this sermon time to be more conversational, and so I have a couple activities for us to do. First, I want to get a sense about who's in the room. I want to get a sense about what traditions have special meaning to you in regards to your moral and ethical worldview. So, for example, give me a show of hands if any of the following traditions have had particular or some influence on you at different times of your life or today. Doesn't matter. How many of you are inspired by the teachings of indigenous traditions, especially those native to these lands of what is now called North America? How about indigenous traditions such as those from Celtic, pagan, or other earth-centered spiritualities, other places in the world? Okay. What about, how many of you have read or valued teachings from Buddhism? Some Buddhism here. Or what about Hinduism or those spiritualities? Anyone resonate especially with the moral teachings of Judaism and the Talmud and those traditions? Or what about Christianity? A lot of influence there. Have any of you been inspired or have read some of the writings of the Quran or other teachings of Islam? So all of these, and I'm guessing many others, are present in this room. And there are lessons we can and should learn from one another. I'm not the expert. Chris is not the expert. None of us are experts. We all just live our lives and we have things to share with one another. And on top of that, we have thousands of diverse religious people on and beyond this interfaith campus that we can and should engage to deepen our own moral clarity. Thousands of people that we can and should engage to deepen our own moral clarity. I'd like to do a second exercise to start bringing out some of the influences of our ethical worldviews. In a moment, I would like all of us to, brace yourself, turn to someone near you. If you feel comfortable, you don't have to do this exercise, and answer these 3 questions. If you'd prefer to just meditate or reflect or run out of the room or journal, go for it. I affirm your choice. Here are the questions. Who has had the biggest impact on your understanding of personal responsibility? Who? Are there any experiences that come to mind that shape your lives? When? And finally, is there a saying, a teaching, or a mantra that you live by? What? So to recap, I am inviting you to consider connecting with someone near you, and consider a person, which could be someone you know, a family member, a friend, someone here in this room, or a public figure, religious or otherwise, alive or dead. Second, an impactful experience, recent or long ago. And finally, a saying, mantra, teaching that you might live by. Before we start talking and get chaotic in here, let's take about a minute in silence to consider these questions. So whether you were taking some time to talk with someone, do personal reflection, thinking about these questions of the people, the experiences, or the mantras or sayings we might live by, I hope that was somewhat meaningful or very meaningful. And perhaps these are questions you can take home with you and write about and think about more, because I expect they're not ones that will go away. I wonder if there's just one or two people who something was said, or you're in your personal individual reflection, that you'd want to share about any of the parts that we just talked about person. Yeah. Oh yeah, go on, Jan.
Well, I was impressed by what Carol said, which was that all the reading she has done, and I can relate to that, and I bet many of us can, all the reading we've done in our lives since young people, we've learned so much from profound stories, and the experience of reading and learning that way is profound.
That's nice. Reading, anyone resonate with that? Engagement, a lot of stories, fables, sacred stories, that can really bring us into a world and into teachings, parables. Others about people's experiences or, mantras or sayings that you live by? You believe that we should love one another. I like that. Thank you. Liz? Our parents. They can be very influential on us. Yeah, Kate? The people, connections in your lives, and all those 35,000 decisions a day that got you day over day somehow here together. Is there anyone else? Yeah.
My friend Miss Lee, she was a former nurse, and she came from Norway originally, and she lived with us when I was born, and she always looked after us, always. And I still feel in my adult life, I got hurt last week, I can hear her say, "You know what to do, bro. You know. I told you what to do."
Those Scandinavians, it's just good. Yes.
I believe that human beings is a misnomer. We should be called human becomes.
Oh.
Because we're constantly becoming and evolving exactly who we were sitting here tonight.
Very much. I love that. Human becomings. Excellent. So anyone else? So I hope that these conversations can carry you into coffee after the service, and please do join me in the library for more conversations if you wish. I want us to just consider before we end what it means to be a congregation that places love at the center. Love is at the center, and we must elevate it now as the heart of who we are and how we talk about our being and our becoming as Unitarian Universalists. And as a member of this beautiful, blooming Columbus Interfaith campus, let us not forget what we sang this morning. These words: Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we can make such sweet harmony. Sing it with me. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we can make such sweet harmony. How sweet this is. How sweet it is. May it be so, and amen.